from last week, we were talking about the nomination of Kamala Harris as the nominee for vice president on the Democratic Party. That has gone on very well as far as we can see. She was nominated, and as we speak right now, so she's actually the nominee for the Democratic Party. But like I promised last week, we want to continue with this discussion because it's going to be very key. And it's my pleasure again which comprises of Washington Osiro from California. Osiro is a writer, is an author, has very, very, very interesting ideas about American and the world politics. And, again, I want to bring back Professor David Monda. Professor Monda teaches at the City University in New York City. He teaches the things that we're discussing about international politics, political science, and more specifically, African-American politics. Again, Dr. Nathan Wangusi is joining us from Florida. Dr. Wangusi has a wealth of experience in terms of Kenya and America. He's gone to school for the most part in America, and he understands the landscape. He's an activist. He's also one of our key persons we go to every time we want to have a serious discussion. And I also want to welcome once again Dr. David Amakobe. Dr. Amakobe is a resident of Delaware, and for the first time now, Delaware is on the international map. One of the reasons why we want to have him today on this show is to give us a sense of what's going on. Now that not Delaware, the small state, I've had so many issues with especially Kenyans. They keep on asking me, where is Delaware? So I'm so glad that at least for the first time, at least now, we are showing everywhere we are the main thing. So when he talks about these issues, he's actually he's talking about democratic politics in Delaware and America. So straight away, let me go to our discussion. Today, it's actually a follow-up of what we discussed last week, and that is the nomination of Kamala Harris as the vice president on the Democratic ticket. And today we want to just hang around the issues about how the nomination went. And straight away, I want to go back to Dr. Amakobe, because he's our host today. Dr. Amakobe, please just give us a rundown of how do you feel about your party's nomination and the process that has this happened in the last week?
Okay, thank you, Chris, for having me today. First of all, I have to make a correction. I am not on the teams of schools or the Democratic Party. I am a supporter of the party per se. I am not speaking for them. I have no authorization to speak for them. So you take it as you had it made. This is my personal view. All right. Now, having said that, I think that the election this time is not a matter of Democrat or Republican. It's a matter of the soul of the country and the world per se. Because the situation we find ourselves in right now, if we let it go on for the next 4 years, we will not be able to recognize the country we live in or the world we live in at all. The circumstances we find ourselves right now is the same circumstances that was 100 years ago, when countries or some people in their countries were feeling very nationalistic, feeling inward. Like can I say, we hear "Make America Great Again." We hear in South Africans say pushing away, not requiring immigrants there. We hear in Europe nationalists taking over or being very prominent. And this is the kind of environment that was there before the First World War in Europe. So we might be looking at the conditions in the US as if there is Democratic or Republican, but you can see there are a lot of Republicans, there were a lot of Republicans, even the Lincoln Project, supporting the Democratic Party candidate. He's not a Democratic Party candidate, but he's an American candidate because he stands for what the country stands for. He stands for what the world should be, as opposed to the opposition, which will lead us into a lot of trouble. So bringing in Kamala Harris was making the ticket whole. This is not window dressing. This is what the country is. Kamala Harris and Biden represent the country today and the country of the future. The opposition ticket, the opposite ticket represents the America of 1930, which is an America that's gone. So Biden did a good job of getting a candidate, a nominee for the vice president who made his ticket whole, who represented the country as it is.
Osiro, let's come back to you because you live in California, where Kamala Harris comes from. Talk to us about what how people in California are feeling about the selection of Kamala Harris, and just generally how the Democratic nomination was handled. And talk to us briefly about why that is not, in as much as it seems like it's a done deal, there are always those red spots on the way.
I think the nomination, the entire nomination process, the nomination of Kamala Harris, really kind of put a nice bow on the Democratic Party in terms of kind of illustrating to the country and to the rest of the world, like the good doctor said, that this is what the future of America looks like. We hear, people talk about the browning of America, and then we also hear people talking about, as goes California, so goes the rest of the nation. So the reality is that the selection of Kamala Harris reflects those two ideals. She's biracial. She represents the most populous state in the nation. She is very, very capable. And between Biden and Kamala, we have this link of the America that has grown, that has worked towards becoming the more perfect union. And then we have somebody who is forward-looking in terms of Kamala Harris, who represents that America. So I think her selection was actually very, very timely and very, very symbolic. Now, as I was telling you before we came on live, I really believe that if the Democratic Party can duplicate the Obama coalition of 2012, and not in its totality, but in just 3 or 4 battleground states, whether it's a combination of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, if they can flip those back from the Republicans in 2016 to the Democrats in 2020, then they will win. But if the challenge is, will they be able to speak to the apprehensions of the people in those states, the independents in those states, the ones who flipped from Obama to Trump in 2012, 2016, will the Democrats be able to speak to those insecurities, those fears, to the point of actually having them pull the lever in November? That still remains a question, and really I'm not going to project. I'm just going to say that if the Democrat, and let me be candid, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat leaning. I'm progressive. I'm liberal. I love the Bay Area. If we can flip 3 or 4 states from 2016 to 2020, we will win. But the challenge is, can we do that?
Professor Monda, please speak briefly about what you thought about the rollout of the Democratic nomination, and also go back to what you're saying, that American politics is very complicated, especially when it comes to racial issues and how we elect our leadership.
Yeah, yes, I think that's a really good point. I'd just like to push back a little bit on what Osiro and Dr. Amakobe stated, because I think I agree with their construction and conception, I mean, the ideas broadly, but I think we also need to remember America in terms of an electoral map is divided almost half and half, straight down the middle. That's number one. Number two, this election is a lot closer than many people think, because if you really analyze the polls, as much as Biden's got the bump from the convention, which is very normal, Trump still has to have his convention. And people are also not factoring in that we'll never have as many people voting by mail as we will have in this election. So that's another whole dynamic. And I also must mention that a lot of people are voting for Trump, not because they support Trump, but they're not convinced that Biden's a probable or a convincing alternative. There's a lot of independents, a lot of suburban moms who think Trump is stronger on law and order, is stronger on terrorism, insurgencies, and immigration. And a lot of these people, you speak with them, they may not tell you that to your face very openly because it's not politically correct. But when they go to vote, wakienda kwa debe, when they go to vote, they will vote Republican, because the Democrats really need to be careful about constructing a narrative of what they will do for the country. That was part of the plan of the convention. And I think they did a good job. They started that process. So at the convention, they start this process of how has the country been for the past 4 years? How does Biden message himself as a candidate? What is his idea for the country? And then you have to create a vision of what you want to do as Joe Biden for the country. You cannot run as Obama's vice president. That was Obama's presidency. Biden needs to construct a message that he is capable and can do a better job than Donald Trump. And lastly, Chris, 67% of the incumbent presidents in the history of our elections have won re-election. So by virtue of someone being in office the way Trump is right now, you have an advantage. You've been in office for 4 years, you have name recognition, you have tremendous fundraising capacity. So Biden really needs to be on the attack in terms of his campaign strategy. They really need to target those key states that Trump won before, that Hillary lost, and also make sure that the Republicans don't get any of the formerly Democratic states. So I think as much as the media cycle here emphasizes that Trump is behind, you cannot count him out. This is the same thing that happened in 2016, and he surprised a lot of people. And I can definitely say there is a possibility, especially with all the challenges with mailing and voter suppression, that this election will be a lot closer than a lot of people think.
Thank you, Professor Monda. Dr. Wangusi, politics is very close to you. Civic action is very close to your heart. And of course, you are a Democrat at heart. Speak to us about how you think the Democrats rolled out their nomination, and also at the same time caution us about not thinking that this is already in the bag.
Thanks, Chris, for having me on the show as usual. So this particular election cycle and as well the conventions are very, very unique. The election cycle is very unique in that you both have a tension between two very different ideas of this country. One that is very strong on nationalism and what we are calling the old identity of American politics, which is primarily dominated by a white majority nationalist. And then on the other hand, you have a more progressive agenda that's being presented on the Democratic side. At the same time, this is all in the backdrop of a pandemic that has very poorly been handled. I think for most observers and most pundits and political voices, this was a done deal before the pandemic broke out, for the reasons that my colleagues have outlined, given that incumbents oftentimes have a lot more support. They were much more aggressive fundraising machinery. The Republican Party is known to be particularly good at this. They already had a very solid base of what they call the silent majority. But immediately the pandemic broke, that was the Republicans' opportunity, particularly Trump's opportunity, to show the country that he was a capable, raucous, and very aggravating leader, but a very capable leader. Unfortunately, he bungled that, and it's been an opening for the Democrats to paint a very an alternate picture of the kind of presidency that they have. And that's why even in the conventions, you had this narrative of we're trying to paint, to present a vision of America a year from now, where people will be able to go out and interact, will be able to go to school. The pandemic will be a thing of the past. The fact is that it's not for lack of a plan that this pandemic has wreaked havoc the way it has. In fact, just about 2 days ago, here in Florida, where we are, we crossed the 10,000 person death mark, which is very traumatizing for many communities in the U.S. So I think from those two perspectives, this election is unique, and the fact that, as has been mentioned, it's going to be primarily a mail-in election. Hence why you see this sort of attempts to muzzle and disrupt that process. You have to remember with elections in the United States, they're not based on a majority, and this was what they call the Great Compromise to keep these United States together, of this idea of having an electoral college. So almost every election in recent times, in almost all of these elections, going, I think, even 50 or 60 years, Democrats have always won the majority. They've always won the majority. But in cases where they lost the electoral vote. And the electoral vote sometimes tips against the scales. I mean, it's often been that way. In fact, even in the last election between Trump and Hillary, that happened. So I think Hillary had a majority of a couple million votes, but that was not enough. And hence this idea that these critical states, and specifically Florida, which is right now with what is going on, we think is a toss-up state. Georgia, which has traditionally been a Republican stronghold, is also being touted as another state that Democrats think they can flip. You saw McCain's wife vouch for Biden in Arizona, which is also another state that they think that is currently a toss-up state. Ohio, which also has quite a number of electoral votes, is also in play, and Pennsylvania. So those are the numbers that I would be watching as an observer. As one of my colleagues has said, this thing is not a done deal. It's not sealed yet, but I think I'd be really interested to see how Democrats play out in those key states. The last thing I'll say about the selection of Senator Harris on the ticket, she also was presented or was put in that position to balance out. I think they did a very good job at not only balancing out the ticket in terms of gender. We know she's the first. I think second female on a major party ticket, but also the first Black and person of South Asian descent. And what that means is you've brought into the fold a very big number of other constituents. So you have people who are disgruntled because of the really bad immigration policies. You have the Black vote in there. You have a big section of the women's vote. So I think that really balanced the ticket really well. But I'll be cautiously optimistic that this means that it's a very competitive race. But it's not yet a done deal until November 3rd, when the elections are actually carried out.
Dr. Makobe, let's come back to you. Apart from the fact that, right now, many residents of Delaware are celebrating the attention that we have here. By the way, for my viewers, those who don't know, I lived in Claymont, where I was the vice president's neighbor for about 5 years before I moved a little further. I'm still in Delaware, and of course, I pass through his neighborhood when I'm going to work in Philadelphia, just on I-95 North, on my way to Philly, just next to the what we call the big Delaware River. Amakobe, Daktari, people are talking about this, in spite of the fact that the Democrats have unfurled this in a very coordinated and very uncontroversial way. Of course, we don't know what we are recording this show before the Republicans also roll their nominations, but many people are saying that there's all those caution signposts, the red lights that are indicating, because as it is right now, even the polls show what was showing about 4 years ago during the Hillary Clinton and Trump nomination. Please speak to us, and as somebody who studied these things, caution our viewers in terms of what this means and why they should not sit on their laurels, so to speak, and get out the vote.
Yes, I think that we have to recognize that there is no one election in the United States. There are 50 elections. Every state is an election of its own. So Delaware may be a safe state for Biden because it's his home state. We vote for him. And California may vote Democratic, but as both the panelists, all the panelists have said, we need to be able to get enough states to be able to win this thing. And considering that the Republicans have the incumbent advantage, every Democrat need to get out and vote. And if they are voting by mail, like before I came on air, I just saw my vote come in. I almost started feeling it before I came on air. I just feel I just want.
Even have received mine already.
Yes, so you receive it, you feel it, and send it back, because don't sit on it. Don't say I'll do it tomorrow, because if it's not received in time, it won't be counted. If somebody is planning to delay something, let them not be delaying your vote. So do everything, vote early, and tell your friends to vote too, because as we said, this is going to be very close. It has been close before, and also the fact that Democrats always get more votes, but they lose the election. So the point is that we, as Democrats, should not think that because the country has been run so badly that everybody thinks that it's been run badly. We need to get out. We need to express our view that it's been run badly by voting. If you are voting by mail, vote early. If you are going to go to the polling station, go there prepared to stay until you vote.
Osiro, Washington.
Yes.
In fact, what Dr. Makoba said is very true. When you look at America right now, and even you look at it from not just only the local and national politics, but also globally, one will imagine that this is a done deal. that Trump has done such a bad job that it's incomprehensible to re-elect him. Why do you think that is not necessarily true?
Like I said, I think there's the people are looking at what's happening in the country using two separate sets of data. I mean, I think the doctor said, you listen to somebody explain why they're supporting the incumbency, they're supporting Donald Trump, and their rationalization, on the very basic question, who is responsible for handling the pandemic? That's a very basic question. Who is responsible for the 170,000 people dead? That's a very basic question. Now, I mean, the simple answer would be, obviously it's not Donald Trump, but he is the leader. The buck stops with the leader. But there are people who are not willing to even default to that very popular and very common American expression of the buck stops at the top. When it comes to asking who is responsible for mismanaging the pandemic, they quickly default to the governors, to China, to all these other people who are completely, yes, they're maybe indirectly and third, fourth order of magnitude responsible, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the person at the top. And I can guarantee you that if Obama was in office and this pandemic happened when he was in office, he would have been held accountable.
And in that respect, I don't think this election is like no other, because it's really a referendum on not only the values, as Dr. Makobe was saying, but for many people it'll be a choice between whether or not the next couple of years they'll be well and safe in their communities.
Guys, Dr. Makobe and Washington. This discussion continues. I've run out of time, but of course, we are going to reconvene again next week, so that we look at how the Republicans have unfurled their nomination. So I want to thank you guys again for joining me today in talking about these issues. Of course, again, like I said, let's convene next week and see how the Republicans have done in their nomination. I thank you very much for answering the call. These are issues that we're going to be going back to every now and then. Like I said last week, from now until the end of the elections, we're going to be discussing more about American politics and how this affects our lives, because we have a stake in what's going on as much as we have stakes in Kenya. We always think about Kenya, but our lives are here. So our discussion is going to be about these issues. Thank you once again. And viewers, this has been the Diaspora Live Show. Again, I was hosting Washington Osiro from California, Dr. David Makobe from Delaware, Professor David Monda from New York, and Dr. Wangusi from the state of Florida. It's always my pleasure to have this gang here. And this is the gang that I'm going to be coming back to every now and then as we discuss the issues around American elections. My name is Chris Wamalwa, and see you again next week as we discuss about the Republicans and how they've tried to copy the Democrats. See you again next week.